Hello everyone, welcome back to part 3 of how to paint Arkhan the Black. In this video I will be focusing on the armor, the skin, the leather parts and the grey bone. Here is the list of colors that I'm using for part 3. I assembled the body and I kept the head separate and primed them with Abaddon Black. However, the hands with the staff and the sachet are very fragile, therefore I suggest to leave them both unattached to the body. As you can see, on the picture I glued the head to a plastic pedestal to make the painting progress easier. The first color that I'm using for the armor is Naggaroth Night. I use a small base brush and I am applying it on the armor. There is no need to be neat at this stage. Also, let's not forget the helmet. Moving on to Nuln Oil wash, and I am applying it in all the areas which I painted previously with Naggaroth Night. Once the wash is completely dry, I am using a 1-to-1 mix of Naggaroth Night and Russ Grey. And with this mix I start layering all the small details in the armor. Also, in some of the smallest areas, it's best to use it as a highlight, just as a starting color. Now I'm going to be using a wet blending effect. I use it mainly on the shoulders and some of the kneecaps, close to the feet, which are the areas are bigger on the miniature's armor. So this mix I first dilute with water, like a skimmed milk consistency, which is usually used for also airbrushing. The color will look quite intense at the beginning, but when it dries it will give a nice lighter hint to the armor, which will then need to be darkened down by using Naggaroth Night. Same technique, watering down the paint so that it is diluted quite heavily, almost like a wash. And with just a small amount on the brush, I start applying it towards the bottom part in order to reach that nice smooth blend. Now bear in mind that you may need to add multiple layers to achieve the desired result. Now I'm using only Russ Grey and start highlighting all the armor using a small detailed brush and just making a nice highlight on each armor. Now I'm using Fenrisian Grey as a fine highlight. Don't need too much, just a touch. And I finished the shoulder pads, the leg armor, using again the wet blending. This time I mix 1 part Naggaroth Night with 2 parts Fenrisian Grey. Again, dilute it like the milk consistency and apply a very little amount towards the top area parts. After that, once it is dry, I still use the same previous mix and blend the 2 colors together in order to achieve a smooth transition. Now, as you can see in the video, on the leg armor, the lighting is more towards the bottom than the top. The reason being is to match the lighting the same way as on the Dread Abyssal's armor's plate. Now that I'm happy with the result of the armor, I can move on to the skin. I am using Ionrach Skin as a base color. I start applying it with a small layer brush on the stomach area. I am trying to be as neat as possible, where I already painted the armor. I also paint the hands. Also the neck. Once both washes are completely dried, and I'm using Deepkin Flesh, and I start applying it as a layer in both of the areas, so the stomach and neck, and also the hands and the head. And with Pallid Wych Flesh, I highlight all these areas. Again, the hands, mainly the knuckles, don't need too much, just on the some of the sharpest features. The most raised surface of the stomach, around the neck muscles, just a few lines. The cheekbones on the head and the nose. I want to give it a bit more skinnier look for the stomach and the neck, so for this I use Reikland Fleshshade wash and just applying it on the skin areas. I would normally go for white teeth, as mentioned in the book from Mike Lee, Rise of Nagash. Arkhan was introduced that he got his name because his teeth were black. Therefore, I chose for this miniature Rhinox Hide as a base color for the teeth. I apply a touch of Nuln Oil wash onto the teeth. And also in the meantime I use Carroburg Crimson for the throat area, which you can find on the neck inside. Now that the wash is completely dry, I can use Steel Legion Drab as a highlight for the teeth. I use White Scar for the eyes. And finishing it by adding Morarion Green Clear to the eyes. Now I can move on to the leather and straps. For all these areas, I base paint them with Rhinox Hide. Then following it with Nuln Oil wash, I apply it in all the leather areas. Once the wash is completely dry, then I use Gorthor Brown. On the boots, I use a small dry brush and start dry brushing first. Then with a small layer brush I start highlighting the leather areas, including the boots as well. Now that the leather is complete, I can focus with the grey bone. And for this I use Mechanicus Standard Grey as the base color. And I start base painting the bottom part of the staff, also the top section, and also the bone color and the back of the helmet. I use Agrax Earthshade wash onto the Mechanicus Standard Grey areas. Once the wash is completely dry, then I start layering with Dawnstone. and finishing it by highlighting it with Administratum Grey. And that's about it for this part video. See you in part 4, where I will be finishing the miniature. If you enjoy the contents I make, subscribe to my channel, leave a like and hit the bell for future video tutorials. If you want to see more pictures of my works, I will leave the links to my social media pages down in the description below. See you in the next one. Cheers.